Hello and welcome to Nirmal Bang, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hero Dadya. We have with us Mr. Rajnish Kumar, former chairman at SBI, joining in. Welcome to the show, Rajnish, and always a pleasure to speak to you and get insights from you.
Thank you.
Rajnish, last 12 to 18 months, yes, have been difficult for the economies across. However, the kind of revival that we started to see, what do you make of it?
It's a very good sign that the economy is recovering, although we are still yet to reach the pre-COVID levels. And that way the per capita income and the income is down. So we have to quickly not only reach pre-COVID level, but also need to show a decent growth, because in India we have to realize that still there is a lot of people who are living below the poverty line, or their income needs to increase, and that is possible only when the economy grows at a faster rate. But so far, I would say, given the current situation, the recovery, I would say, is quite satisfactory.
Right. So a lot of economic indicators that you see right now, many of them have crossed the pre-pandemic level, but sequential momentum is slowing down. What do you make of it? Because clearly, if you go to see urban and rural unemployment has inched up in the month of August. And do you think with this, the best of rural growth now seems to be behind us?
So the indicators, of course, they are mixed. As I said, that we need to bring normalcy to the growth rate, and India needs to grow at least at 8%. That is what the ambition was, and we are nowhere close to that. And there are a couple of reasons. One is, of course, government finances, whether center or state, they were strained, which impacted the government spending, which also has an impact on the GDP growth. But with the revenue buoyancy, which we are seeing in the last 2-3 months, whether it is direct taxes or GST, collections, and the borrowing program which the central government has announced, it gives a lot of comfort that government has now some elbow room to spend to increase the expenditure. The second is, of course, private sector investment is still is not at the level what it should be. So that is another thing. Government alone cannot do the heavy lifting, and it's very important that the private sector investment in the economy also goes up, and particularly in the gross capital formation. Third is, of course, the consumption demand, which needs to come up. And there are a couple of now constraints also developing. If it is power, then we see that there are coal shortages. Maybe it is a temporary phenomenon. And now cars. Today only I read in the newspaper that there is a long waiting queue because there is a shortage of. So there are like you get over something, and then some new issues or problems also at times crop up. But it is absolutely important that a consumption boost is needed. The government spending needs to be stepped up, and private sector investment in the economy also needs to go up if we want to achieve the higher growth.
Right. So overall, Rajneesh, if you see in terms of growth and inflation, how important will inflation continue to be for the government vis-a-vis the growth that we want to achieve?
This is always a dilemma. This is not something new. But considering the way the crude oil prices are going up, and earlier there were separate issues around the supply, but inflation is a real threat. And somewhere government or RBI will have to take steps to put a check on the inflation. So not a very happy situation. And it cannot be growth at any cost. At any cost means that the country cannot afford a very high inflation. And that is where it may be time, and I'm sure that when now the Monetary Policy Committee will be meeting, and we will have a monetary policy statement on the 8th of October. So inflation will also receive due attention from the policymakers. But yes, this is a challenge currently that we want to grow faster, and at the same time, inflationary pressure is building up in the.
Right. So if you take the CPI number as well, which came in for the month of August, it seems that, overall that the CPI inflation would likely pull down below 5%. Now, if we do see a decline, do you think the RBI will then be able to continue with its accommodative stance for the longer time in the near future? And we could see a mild relief rally in the benchmark 10-year bond yields in the near term.
One is benchmark bond yields. They were impacted by the announcement of the government that their borrowings are to be contained, so that had a desired impact on the 10-year bond yields. And about the inflation, if the CPI number is below 5, then definitely it gives more elbow room to the RBI to continue with the soft stance as far as the monetary policy is concerned. But there is, of course, today excess liquidity in the system, and the banking system is unable to deploy because the demand for credit from the corporates is also not picking up. So there are many connected issues here. But if the CPI numbers are, say, if they are below 5%, then definitely RBI has headroom to continue with the current policy stance.
Right. And overall, if you see in terms of the first quarter of FY22, our current account surplus was at 0.9% of GDP, and FY22 CAD is seen at around 0.8% of the GDP. So, taking these numbers into consideration, what do you make of what the borrowing is expected to look like? Do you think the government could overshoot? And number two, how do you see the fiscal deficit panning out?
Fiscal deficit, so far the story for the current year has been a fairly good story. By August, I think it's only 35% of what the deficit was expected. So to that, in that sense, I think government finances looks in much better shape than what one would have expected given the COVID-19 scenario. And about you talked about the current account deficit. So on the forex front or the external management, I think we are in a very comfortable position. And of course, the cause for worry is the rising energy prices, and the crude has almost crossed $80. And India's dependence on energy import continues to be very high. So that is where the inflationary expectation is not coming only from the supply side constraints in India, but the rising oil prices also is a matter of concern as far as the inflation is concerned. But the foreign exchange reserves, we are, I think, in a very comfortable position as of now.
Right. And overall, Rajnish, with regards to where credit growth goes, it seems we are seeing a slow rebound. It was up around 6.7% in the month of August, but largely remained flat on a month-on-month basis. Taking this into consideration, how further do we need to see credit growth improve from here on?
If we look at the composition of where the banks are going, so corporate credit is down, and there are a couple of reasons for that. As I said, that the pace of investment, which has slowed down by the private sector in particular, and the other is the deleveraging which has happened, and consciously corporates have deleveraged their balance sheet. So corporate credit, it is not growing at the rate at which it should. Most of the growth is coming from the retail, and quite a bit of it is also coming in the unsecured personal credit. I think for the economy's future, it is important that corporates invest more in the economy by way of capital expenditure, and today the banks are in a position to fund that expenditure.
Right. So, how important is government capex and corporate capex for the performance of the banking space to improve? Because since 2015, banks were in the cleanup cycle. There was a lot of consolidation that has happened as well of various PSU banks. Credit growth was moderate, and AQR was something that was being done by the RBI. So, from here on, what is important to see the growth of the sector improve?
As far as capex is concerned, that is what has been happening, that most of the heavy lifting is being done by the government. So we are coming to the same question, the same answer, that the private capex that needs to improve. That is not happening. Most of the capex, or the larger share of capex, is coming from the government, and government in any case has its own limitation in terms of resources. And we have a huge infrastructure pipeline. And that's very crucial for the growth of the economy. And when you have a, say, 100 lakh crore rupees pipeline, government alone, whether central or state, they cannot fund it. It has to be a funding through public-private partnership or private investments to bridge the gap. In 5 years, government will be able to allocate resources, but not to the extent of 100 lakh. So, that is where the role of the private sector also becomes very crucial.
Right. And overall, Rajnish, with regards to where the bad bank goes, I mean, we've been talking about it since quite some time. And after years of debate and discussions on whether setting up a bad bank or an AMC to take over the NPLs that are burdening the India, the banking sector would be beneficial, we've actually decided to opt for this route in its battle against bad loans. So, what would your take be, and how long a process is this going to be, according to you?
So, Reserve Bank of India yesterday only they have given approval for setting up the National Asset Reconstruction Company. The second part is the resolution company, IDERC, whatever name they are giving, India Debt Resolution Company. And there are a couple of advantages of having a bank. One is the stop fragmentation of the asset under sale, which can lead to better recovery. The decision making can be faster. The management bandwidth at the banks, which will sell that can be freed up, because a lot of time and resources are spent on managing the bad loans. It will not have immediate impact on the balance sheet or P&L of the banks, because most of these assets are fully provided for. So immediately it will be some sort of a P&L neutral or balance sheet neutral exercise. These are not the assets which are carrying much of net book value in the balance sheet of the banks. So the success of this endeavor is dependent on two things. One is the overall constraints in which the lenders work in recovery of the loan performing loans. Say dependence on the NCLT or any other legal process or DRT or under service act. So those constraints parallelly needs to be addressed for anyone to have a chance of improving the recovery from the bad loans. That is the environmental or the ecosystem. And second is the capabilities of the new resolution company, which is proposed to be set up. If these are the people who are capable, who are best in their class, they are incentivized properly, and that is the structure which has been envisaged. So the success of the resolution company would determine the success of this entire exercise. And that is where when all the structures were being planned and IBA had worked on this paper, it was decided that the asset resolution company, IDRCL, or whatever name you call it, it would be a separate entity and where the private sector talent can be attracted. So this is a crucial difference. So there are certain advantages of going through this route, but ultimately we would know when it has started functioning, and then after 1 year probably we can review that what they have done and they have not.
Right. And according to you, how important is it with regards to where the bad bank goes to clean up all of this that we're looking at? And post that, what's the kind of new system that we could be seeing?
It could be like this is the bad bank or ARC. So in the first part, there is one added advantage that the security receipts have been guaranteed by the government. But that dispensation is limited to the existing revenues, which will be transferred. Going forward, the banks, depending upon the resolution capability of the new entity, they could be encouraged that whenever they see signs of stress or there is a burden, they can transfer it to this entity. So it can be a very important institution in resolving the bad assets where the job is done professionally and the decision making is not fragmented across the lenders. I think it's a good move forward. But as I said, for this entity, or for that matter, any other entity to succeed in resolution and recovery of bad debts, it's important that the ecosystem around that also needs considerable input.
Right. And very lastly, Rajnish, overall, in terms of where the liquidity goes, do you think it's actually time that the RBI takes its hands off the liquidity pump from here on?
Yeah, we are in an excess liquidity situation, and all of us know with the past experience that when there is excess liquidity, what happens that the banks at times, in their desire to deploy this liquidity, they forget to price the risk properly. So that is the danger we carry when we have so much excess liquidity in the system. Maybe gradually, and that is where now we have to wait till late October when the policy announcement happens. It will give some pointers. But I think it's time that RBI starts sucking the excess liquidity from the system.
Right. All right, Rajnish. Thank you so much for getting us your views and your thoughts. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, get insights from you. Thank you. Stay safe and speak to you soon again.
Thank you. Bye.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel for in-depth interviews of India Inc. and press the bell icon so that you do not miss our updates.